There are reports of massive escalation in violence at the Foxconn iPhone manufacturing facility in China. The riot police are now closing in with their tear gas shells and shields. The Foxconn staff managed to get a fire engine and sprayed water to negate the impact of the tear gas canisters. But the situation is worsening. Will it impact the manufacturing of iPhones? COVID cases again on the rise in China. I'm Gaurav Sawant. We will get you the latest on the other side of the China wall. But as always, let's get started with the headlines at 10. Shraddha Walkar approached the Vasai police about threats and abuse by Aftab Amin Poonawalla. The chilling November 2020 letter detailed Shraddha's fear that Aftab may not only kill her, but he also threatened to chop her into pieces. Her fears sadly came true 2 years later. After the political fallout over his massage videos, a fresh video of Aam Aadmi Party's Khas Minister Satyendra Jain emerges, shows Jain getting a lavish meal inside his Tihar jail cell. Battleground Gujarat heats up and dog whistle politics escalate. Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma and Rahul Gandhi clash, with Himanta Biswa Sarma saying Rahul Gandhi looks like Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. Congress up in arms. Another union minister claims Pakistan wants a Congress government in Gujarat. An Islamic State link to Mangaluru blast unravels. Tri-state probe begins after accused Mohammad Sharik allegedly visited 3 states before the blast. Sources say Coimbatore bomber and Mohammad Sharik were at Kerala's Aluva at the same time. It's a riot-like situation at the world's largest iPhone manufacturing and assembly facility in China. Thousands of iPhone factory workers have clashed with armed riot police. The workers have been tear-gassed. They've been attacked by armed Chinese police, and the situation appears to be deteriorating. Chinese social media is full of videos of clashes and injured workers continuing to battle security personnel in white hazmat or hazardous material suits. Our next report gets you the latest from China.
Hundreds of workers joined protests at Foxconn's major iPhone plant in China Wednesday. The Zhengzhou site has come to represent a build-up of frustrations with the country's ultra-harsh health crisis rules. The trigger for the protests, which began early Wednesday, appeared to be a plan to delay bonus payments. That was according to many of the demonstrators on live-stream feeds, in videos which could not be immediately verified by Reuters. Some workers, surrounded by people in full hazmat suits, chanted, "Give us our pay." Other footage showed workers taking down quarantine barriers and smashing surveillance cameras. Many of the problems have emerged since Foxconn imposed a so-called closed-loop system in October. This sees operations staff live and work on site, isolated from the wider world. It's sparked anger about strict quarantine rules, the company's inability to stamp out outbreaks, and poor conditions. Former workers have estimated that thousands have fled the factory campus. Before the unrest, the Zhengzhou site employed some 200,000 people. To retain staff and lure more workers, Foxconn has had to offer bonuses and higher salaries. The firm said Wednesday it would communicate with employees and the government to avoid violent incidents from happening again. Foxconn is Apple's biggest iPhone maker, accounting for 70% of global shipments.
And let me now get you the latest from the world's largest iPhone manufacturing facility at Zhengzhou. Information filtering in indicates riot police have now been called in. There are SWAT teams, special weapons and tactics teams that have now been called in. They've surrounded the iPhone plant. Police have fired tear gas shells at workers, and the workers, according to some videos that have been put out on social media platforms in China, workers have smashed CCTV cameras and window panes at the Foxconn facility. A number of workers have also been assaulted and detained. There are videos of injured workers, blood streaming down their faces, running away from the police, and police personnel surrounding them and assaulting them. Several iPhone factory workers are injured according to these reports. Workers are demanding better pay and better living conditions. The Foxconn factory unrest has escalated in China. The tension had been brewing for several months now, especially at this facility. This is a facility where, according to reports, there are at periods of time 200,000 workers, 2 lakh workers at this Foxconn plant. A large number of them have apparently been infected, and new workers who were called in to replace them were told that they will live and work separately. Ex-soldiers of the Chinese army, of the People's Liberation Army, they've also been called in to help. We'll get you that big story. Joining me for the latest, Sai Kiran Kannan. He's an OSINT open source intelligence expert. He's been tracking the latest developments in China. Geeta Mohan is India Today's foreign affairs editor, and Andrew K.P. Leung is an international and independent China strategist based in Hong Kong, joins us on the show. Sai Kiran, I want to begin by asking you, China's very opaque, but Chinese social media is putting out some stuff using open source intelligence. What more can you piece together? What's the current situation?
I think as of now, Gaurav, the only source of imagery and videos for us have been from the workers themselves. So they've managed to, share their videos, the photos, etc., via Weibo or any of the other, social media profiles that are in China. And before they get pulled down, then people from other parts of the world, they kind of download it. Weibo has been one of the main platforms, where they've been sharing a lot, and WeChat as well. But we know that the way these get censored in China. But so what they've also been telling is that the living conditions have been very, very bad, because you have 2 groups of employees here. One, employees who've already been working there for months together, and many of them, they've eventually been COVID positive, so they have kind of been quarantined within those premises itself, because this is a closed loop system. So once they finish work from factories, they are in the same compound, they have the dormitories there, so they cannot go back home.
Okay.
And this is due to the zero COVID policy. Secondly, last month and weeks before, there were a lot of employees from the same unit who actually escaped, and they went back home. So these were the employees who had to be replaced, and so Foxconn authorities got in touch with the local government authorities, and there were also some local recruiters who have kind of promised over the top bonuses, because they were desperate to get the workers in. So when these new workers came in, and they were asked to work, and they were also asked to share dormitories with possibly people who are already COVID positive, etc. So
okay,
that really irked them.
Stay with me for a moment, Geeta. Workers appear to be extremely angry over this unfulfilled bonus promise. Also, as Sai was describing the working and living conditions, what more can you tell us about these unfulfilled promises, whether it's working conditions or living conditions?
Well, primarily both the working conditions and living conditions, and the fact that there were conditions laid with the lockdown. A lot of them very young, very iffy about staying in that lockdown situation. Gaurav, there was time at Foxconn initially, and Sai Kiran had already reported a lot on what was happening in China, wherein a lot of them were seen through videos, open source, information gathering, how they were trying to flee the Foxconn facility because they were not being allowed to. There were many volunteers who actually, because the entire area around Foxconn in Tangsao also was under lockdown, and there was no transport available. There were volunteers who were keeping food and water for those who were fleeing the Foxconn facility. That's how bad the situation was. And right now, it is not just about the situation within China, but there are reports of increasing number of COVID cases. Forget about the zero COVID scenario that President Xi Jinping is looking at, Gaurav. At this juncture, it doesn't seem like they're anywhere close to containing the virus, although it
Okay.
might not be as alarming as the first or the second wave in China. Having said that, they still have increasing cases of COVID, and if it goes on, if this continues and the lockdowns continue, it is going to have a major impact on Chinese economy as also global economy.
Stay
The
with me.
fact
Stay
that
with me. Let me bring in Andrew KP Leung. He gives us a perspective from from Hong Kong, where you are at this point of time. Andrew, why has riot police been called out? There are reports of CCTV cameras being smashed and clashes between iPhone factory workers and riot police.
Well, because it is a large scale protests in country of China. Obviously, large scale protests of any kind are not tolerated because it's destabilizing the country. One has got to look into the reasons why this is happening, because the Foxconn is the world's largest supplier and producer of mobile phones based in China, using China's relatively cheap labor and the efficiency of the supply and value chain. But these value chains have now been disrupted by the worldwide disruptions caused by logistical dislocations because of the and energy prices increases and supply to various materials from other parts of the world. They have all been disrupted because of the war in Ukraine and because of the US sanctions and trade war against China and so on and so forth. And additionally, I think that you can judge from the complaint that the workers are complaining about the withholding or the cancellation of bonus payments. That means the Foxconn, as the largest employer of mobile phone workers, is trying to squeeze the workers. And then, of course, the restrictions of the pandemic doesn't help the situation. So it's a combination of disruption of supply and value chain, increasing costs and logistical dislocations, the Foxconn's mismanagement of their staff, and then the putting the staff in harsh working conditions.
No, so is this Foxconn mismanagement, or is this mismanagement by the Chinese government, police and local administration? Sai Kiran, has it or can it impact the production of iPhones? Is it already impacting the production of iPhones?
So Gaurav, this issue is not something that's just surfaced a few days ago. So this has been happening from the end of October.
Yes.
And Foxconn had already predicted, that there would be large-scale protests. So they've already communicated that, there would be, slight reduction in production for the month of November. Now, experts, indicate that it could be as close as, 30% reduction in the overall production numbers from this facility owing to the protests. But, if this is going to escalate more and, if more people are going to get sick, it might even increase. So that's the figure we're looking at.
Geeta, it appears that iPhones are being manufactured using forced labor in China. Xi Jinping's worst kept secret is now out in public domain, and not just in Xinjiang, but even Foxconn. These images are as clear as day that people are being forced to work and live in inhuman conditions.
Absolutely, Gaurav. Scholarly conditions, very the fact that they're being forced to stay on. In fact, the ones who had fled in the first few months itself, like Sai said, in the beginning of October, they had started, when the lockdown began, a lot of people had left. They'd actually asked people from the region, from the area, whether they could replace those who had fled, which is absolutely impossible. While Foxconn, which is headquartered and based out of Taipei, Taiwan, has been rather reticent about it, the officials within Foxconn based out of China or Chinese nationals have been doing a huge cover-up job for the government. They are in cahoots. The fact that the government has put strict lockdown rules and measures which are being followed by Foxconn company based out of Guangzhou is in itself an example of how the company and the government are working in tandem. Having said that, the forced labor that we're talking about, or the fact that people are not being allowed, that has been a huge infringement on the rights of people and their movement, freedom of movement, certainly is an area of concern, and most probably will be taken up by the global community, but maybe a little later, because at this point in time,
Look
I
at these
suppose the
images.
whole issue.
Yes, look at these images, Geeta, on our television screen for the benefit of our viewers. These are engineers, these are iPhone factory workers. Look at the way they are being surrounded by the police in hazmat suits and assaulted. Baton charge, cane charge, tear gas shells. Andrew KP Leung, it is now clear as day. Forced labor, sir, is being used to manufacture iPhones. Workers are being thrashed, beaten black and blue to work and make iPhones.
Well, this is ridiculous because all the jobs offered, of course, no one is going to be forced to take up these jobs. If you don't take up these jobs, you can find other jobs. If you can't find other jobs, you'll be unemployed. That's the same situation in any country.
Are you looking at these images? Is that ridiculous, or these images are ridiculous, Mr. KP Leung? If you're looking at these images of people being assaulted, Saikiran, it's quite a shame. iPhone using forced labor, workers who are living in inhuman conditions, workers who are being assaulted, beaten and being made to make iPhones and not being paid either their bonuses, being forced to live in cramped conditions with COVID positive patients as they allege.
Yes, Gaurav, I think it's very important to note also, to see the videos in a much more close fashion, because many videos that, we sourced from these social media accounts of, Chinese citizens, so they could be workers, etc. So there were a lot of people who were protesting there. They were also shouting that, we want to go home. So that is definitely not a place where they're voluntarily coming in and they are having the freedom to quit the job, because you also know that Foxconn and the Chinese government, they're desperate to keep the production levels high. So that is the reason they've been forced to work in these conditions. Many people had to escape from these facilities to get back home. So it's not that it's you just sign a resignation paper and you go back. So it's a forced way of working there. Secondly, one of the most important things is you very rarely see these kind of people movement in China, and this time it all comes down to the fact that the zero COVID policy has been going on for a long time. So this is also a reflection of that people are really irritated by the situation where they're not able to move freely and do what they want to do. And that's also one of the reasons why the first thing that happened was the surveillance cameras was smashed up.
Yes.
Even though they were taking pictures and videos, the surveillance camera was something that they also knew would be monitoring them very closely. So that was one of the things that was smashed up first.
Geeta, the silence of the iPhone manufacturers in the United States is also deafening. They talk of freedom, they talk of rights, except when it comes to profiteering from cheap and forced labor in China.
Well, not just United States of America, even the headquarters in Taiwan, they've been rather reticent about it, because this is an economic situation as much as it is the whole idea of taking on China. They do know that the supply of iPhones is going to take a major hit, and their latest version of iPhones will not see the markets for a very, very long time. So that certainly is a problem, because despite the lockdown, despite the measures that China has taken, the Foxconn facility in Tangsao is actually not working in full capacity. In fact, they've not been able to supply the numbers and the quantity that they should have on regular basis. So it is going to take a hit, and everybody is worried, because economics does trump a lot of other concerns. We see countries see the other way when their economic interests lie in that country, and that's the reason why.
Okay.
While there has been outrage, and like Sai said, the rarity over here, Gaurav, is the fact that people's movement in China is something that you do not see very often. That people coming out, not just coming out, even if they they are coming out that the videos now are available and can be accessed of the treatment that is being meted out to the people in China. That is rare. And companies
Let's see what
that
these
benefit from
Western companies, you know, is it profit over human rights for them? The manufacturers of iPhone, all these big companies and their big talk, will they now walk the talk on democracy and rights? We'll track that story very closely. Andrew KP Leung, Geeta Mohan and Saikiran, for the moment, many thanks for joining me. Chinese President Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy has resulted in huge trouble and chaos across China. The first death in the past 6 months in Beijing due to COVID has resulted in a massive lockdown and more panic. China has perhaps the strictest zero COVID policy of Xi Jinping, and there may be thousands of people, they're watching football, the World Cup together in Qatar, in China, city after city, now witnessing a massive lockdown. Sneha Murdani gets us more.
A QR code to use public facilities, go to office, school, eat in a public place, work as a construction worker, a QR code to breathe. This is how strict things are in China. Panic if a person's QR code next to you is red. Lockdown's a way of life. Even 3 years after the outbreak, as Beijing reported its first death due to COVID in 6 months, sending the country into a tizzy once again. China's prolonged zero COVID policy, scientifically flawed and inhuman, has led to widespread anger. A journalist from Straits Times explained in a tweet how tough things were vis-a-vis quarantine. These pictures speak volumes of how difficult life is for people living in China right now. It is indicative of the fact that the government is hell-bent on implementing an impractical zero COVID policy which has a negative fallout on the economy of China, as is evident. Daily new cases in China hover around the 28,000 mark, and this is not even an underestimate given the brutality with which testing is done. Beijing has shut parks and museums, also schools. China has the world's strictest lockdowns and the country continues to be in doldrums. Rising unemployment, an economy on a downward spiral, and a disgruntled population. President Xi Jinping has been chosen again as the leader of his people, but it is the people who are at the receiving end of the government's policy of optimizing their COVID response. Clearly, there is no respite in sight. In New Delhi, Sneha Murdani for India Today.
Spine-chilling details have now emerged in the Shraddha murder investigations. Shraddha Walkar actually feared Aftab Amin Poonawala and she approached the police. Incidentally, this day, the 23rd of November, 2 years ago in 2020, she made a written complaint to the Maharashtra police saying she feared for her life. She feared that Aftab, who used to regularly assault her, beat her up, would kill her and cut her to pieces. He threatened to do so. Sadly, the police did nothing, and 2 years later, that's exactly what Aftab is alleged to have done.
She was victim of India's most spine-chilling murder. a case which has numbed the nation. Shraddha Walkar, seen here in her college days, probably foresaw her brutal murder. She feared the worst at the hands of her live-in partner in this tell-all letter to Mumbai police in November 2020. In her complaint, Shraddha revealed assault, abuse and death threats by Aftab, who even chillingly threatened to cut her into pieces and throw her body away. Her worst fears came true less than 2 years down the line, when Aftab actually killed Shraddha and cut her body into 35 pieces, broke open her skull and scattered the remains in Delhi. India Today spoke to friends of Shraddha, who narrated how she was hospitalized in 2020 after being thrashed by Aftab.
ये दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि हम जो सभी कॉलेज वाले दोस्त थे, ये कुछ इन्फ्लुएंस जरूर आफ्ताब की ओर से रहा था कि उसने जानबूझकर ये पूरी कोशिश की थी किस तरीके से वो काट सके श्रद्धा के जो करीबी दोस्त हैं, उसकी फैमिली है, सबसे उसको दूर करके बिल्कुल अकेला कर सके, जिससे कि वो उसके ऊपर पूरा इन्फ्लुएंस कर सके और उसके इशारे पे जो भी चीजें हो वो हो।
मेरे को मिले थे तो उनके गले पे बहुत निशान था। जब भी मेरे को मिले थे, फर्स्ट टाइम मिले थे तो उनके गले पे निशान था, उनके चेहरे पे लगा था उनको, और पीछे बाजू पीठ पे उनको लगा था। उनको मैं बोला हॉस्पिटल ले गया, तो हॉस्पिटल नहीं, तो पुलिस चौकी लेके गया उनको, तुलिन पुलिस चौकी में। तुलिन चौकी में लेके जाने के बाद में एनसी किया, श्रद्धा ने खुद लिख के दिया।
India Today also accessed Shraddha's final chat hours before she was strangled to death by Aftab. On May 18, just hours before her murder, Shraddha messaged her friend on Instagram saying she has some news. A couple of hours after, the friend responded by asking, "What's the news?" But there was no reply. Months later, on September 15, the same friend texted Aftab about Shraddha's whereabouts, but got no response. He even attempted a call, but that too went unanswered. Days later, the same friend texted Shraddha again on Instagram, asking whether she's safe. Aftab, who by then was in possession of Shraddha's phone, saw the message but did not reply. Shraddha's former reporting manager, who she confided in about getting hospitalized after assault, is now being questioned. While Aftab's butchery may one day be proved, one cannot begin to understand the inhuman torture that Shraddha had undergone. With Tejsri Purandare, Bureau Report, India Today.
We will continue to track developments on the story, but that is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching.